Welcome back to another Whiteboard Wednesday. Today we're going to be tackling the question, does carbohydrate make you fat? Let's have a look. So there's so much stuff out there at the moment circulating around online about low carbohydrate diets because don't eat carbohydrates, they are going to make you fat. And while this is, mainly in the fitness industry or the health industry, seeping its way into the athletic area, and I find that, and I see it a lot, that it's causing athletes a lot of problems. At the end of the day, carbohydrate is the fuel for your muscles, and if you want to perform at a peak level, you need to fuel with carbohydrates. Your body can't run solely on fat. There's a point in your exercise intensity where your body shifts from fueling with primarily fat to primarily carbohydrate. We can change that in training. We can improve the body's ability to metabolize fat at higher intensities. But at the end of the day, if you're going to perform well on race day and recover from your training, carbohydrates is an essential component of it. So if we have a look here, carbohydrate comes into the stomach, gets broken down, starts to go through the intestines. This is where it starts to get absorbed into the blood as glucose. The glucose is then stored in the muscle as muscle glycogen, or in the liver as liver glycogen. If the stores are full, we've got no more room for muscle glycogen, our liver's completely full, then yes, any excess carbohydrate is going to be going and stored as fat. The body doesn't want to waste it. It's a survival mechanism back from our primal days. Any excess carbohydrate will be stored as fat. You did right there. However, if you've been out training and you've depleted your liver glycogen and your muscle glycogen, then if you're consuming the right amount of carbohydrates, then it's going to be stored as muscle glycogen and liver glycogen to be able to fuel your body. So just because you eat carbohydrate doesn't mean it's going to be converted into fat. If you've emptied the tanks, then it's going to be put into there first of all before it gets converted into fat. So that's a big thing to remember. So the one thing athletes can really focus on is on days where you're emptying the tanks of muscle glycogen or liver glycogen. You need to consume carbohydrates or more carbohydrates on those days. On the days where you're not emptying the tanks, so you're just doing easy training or it's a recovery day, you don't need to eat as much carbohydrate because it will eventually be stored as fat. So the key thing is think about it as a car. When do you fill your car up with petrol? You fill it up when you've been driving long road trips or when you've been doing lots of stop-starting around town. You don't fill it up just to go to the shop or down the road unless the day before you might have done a big trip and it still might be on empty. So think about carbohydrate as your fuel, your muscles and your liver as your fuel tanks, and then think about how much do I need to put in, because depending on how much you used will reflect whether or not it gets stored as glycogen or fat. Now for sedentary people, okay, the average Joe Bloggs walking around, if they're not doing any specific exercise, their muscle glycogen and liver glycogen are always pretty full. They never get that depleted. So if they're eating a lot of carbohydrates, it's not going to be able to be stored here because it's full. It's not going to be able to be stored here because that's full. Most of the time after breakfast, that'll be topped back up. So yes, a lot of it does get stored as fat. But endurance athletes and athletes that are training hard should not be afraid of carbohydrates. It is your fuel. You need to be able to fuel to perform well. There are phases in your training where I will deliberately withhold carbohydrate or go for a more of a low carbohydrate, higher fat, higher protein diet at different phases to elicit specific training adaptations, but it's not an all the time thing. So there you have a little bit of an insight. Carbohydrate can make you fat, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is going to make you fat. There you have it. Get out there, train harder, but also smarter.